My name is Anti Stories, and this channel is where pain turns into power. Here, you'll hear real stories of betrayal, survival, and revenge. Subscribe if you're ready to hear justice served cold. Turn on the subtitles for a better experience. Enjoy.
My name is Emily, and for most of my life, I believed I was born into a family that should never have existed. People like to think family means love and support, but I learned early that blood can carry cruelty just as well. My earliest memories are of my father's voice. It wasn't comforting or kind. It was sharp, like glass scraping against my skin. "Stop crying, Emily. You're weak," he used to say, his words cutting deeper than any hand. My mother was always there but quiet, like wallpaper, faded and unnoticed, disappearing when things got hard. Then there was my brother Derek, 3 years older, who became my father's shadow. He learned all the cruel ways my father used and made up some of his own. When I tried to hide, Derek found me every time. "You think you can run?" he'd sneer. "You're mine." I used to think I was invisible. When I was little, I'd hide in corners, pulling my knees to my chest, trying to make myself small so Derek wouldn't see me. But he always did. My father would laugh when Derek hit me. "Good for you, Emily," he'd say. "Makes you tougher." My mother never stepped in. She stood in the doorway, arms crossed, eyes on the floor. I hated her silence almost as much as I hated their violence. By 16, I started keeping notebooks, messy collections of sketches and words that became the only place I felt safe. I would draw when the yelling was too loud. I would write when my chest felt too tight to breathe. Those notebooks became my escape, proof that I was more than what they tried to make me. At 18, I left. I thought freedom would feel like sunlight, like stepping out of a dark tunnel. But it didn't. I moved into a small apartment in a rough part of town, the kind of place where you double-lock the door and keep the windows shut. I worked 2 jobs to keep the lights on, waitressing at a diner by day and cleaning an art studio by night. It wasn't glamorous, but for the first time, the bruises on my arms came from work, not from someone else's anger. Even then, they didn't let me go. My father called, demanding, "Emily, come fix the sink. It's leaking again." Derek showed up unannounced, sometimes drunk, sometimes high, always with the same smirk that made my skin crawl. "Hey, little sis," he'd say, voice dripping with mockery. "Got some money to spare?" At first, I ignored them. Then I tried to stand up for myself. "Leave me alone," I said once, voice shaking. Derek just laughed. "You'll never get away from us." They had a way of making me feel like I was still that scared little girl hiding in corners. Everything changed last winter. It was a cold, gray Sunday evening, and I had just come home from my shift at the diner. My feet ached, and my hands were dry and cracked from washing dishes all day. I unlocked my apartment door, and something felt wrong. The door opened too easily, and when I stepped inside, my stomach dropped. Everything was out of place. Drawers pulled out, blankets on the floor, shelves ransacked. It felt like someone had torn my life apart. Then I saw him. Derek was sitting on my couch like he owned the place, flipping through one of my sketchbooks. He looked up with a lazy, cruel grin. "What's this? Your little secrets?" he sneered. I felt something inside me break. Those sketchbooks weren't just paper, they held years of my life, the only safe place I'd ever had. He tossed it aside like trash, grabbed the jar of cash I'd been saving, almost $300, months of tips, gone in seconds. When I tried to stop him, he shoved me hard. I hit the wall, pain exploding down my side, and I crumpled to the floor. "Don't cry, baby sister," he spat as he left. "This is what you get." I called my father, shaking with anger and fear. Derek broke into my place. He stole my money. "You have to do something," His voice was cold and distant. "You're overreacting, Emily. Derek's just being Derek. Get over it." "He hurt me," I whispered. "He pushed me." "Stop being weak," he snapped. "You're just like your mother." That was the last time I let his words touch me. Something inside me hardened that night. I cleaned my apartment, but my mind was elsewhere. I wasn't thinking about what I had lost. I was thinking about how I would make them regret ever touching me. I started watching them, like a predator watches prey. My father stayed stuck in his old patterns. Drinking in front of the TV at night. Derek was reckless. He'd gotten involved with dangerous people, shady dealers, men with quick tempers and short fuses. I started piecing together his habits, his secrets, the cracks in his life that were waiting to break open. I sat in my car parked a few houses down from my father's, notebook in hand, writing down everything I saw. Derek kept a stash of cash in a red toolbox in the garage. He owed money to a man who drove a black SUV and looked like he could break Derek without effort. Derek thought he was clever, but I could see he was desperate. He was drowning, and all I had to do was push him a little further. For weeks, I planned. I built my revenge slowly and carefully, like building a fire, gathering small pieces, feeding it until it burned. One night, I slipped into my father's garage and took Derek's stash. It wasn't much, but I knew it would hurt him. I left just enough so he wouldn't notice right away. Then I planted seeds. I knew Derek had enemies, and I made sure a rumor got back to the man in the black SUV that Derek had been stealing from someone's cut. I stayed invisible, like I did as a child, but this time, invisibility was my weapon. The tension grew fast. Derek became paranoid. One night, his voice cracked over the phone. "I know someone's screwing me. If I find out who, they'll pay." He sounded desperate, scared for the first time. He stopped coming around my apartment, too busy trying to fix his problems. I watched it all, my heart pounding with fear and satisfaction. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was winning. The final act came on a rainy night in March. The cold drops hammered against the windows as I sat quietly inside my apartment, the lights dimmed low. Suddenly, there was a loud, frantic pounding on the front door. My heart jumped into my throat. I looked through the peephole and saw Derek, his face twisted with anger, rain soaking his hair, eyes wild and red. He slammed his fist against the door again and again, each hit shaking the thin wood. "Who took my money? Tell me." His voice was rough as he yelled. "I swear, I'll make them pay." I stayed still, breath shallow, listening to the rage spilling from him like a storm. I didn't open the door. I stayed silent, watching his anger burn itself out. He didn't know it was me on the other side. 2 days later, a black SUV rolled slowly into the street near my father's house. The man behind the wheel was sharp-eyed and cold, the kind of person you don't want to cross. I watched from my car across the street as he stepped out and moved towards Derek's door. What happened inside, I never saw. But when Derek came out a few hours later, his face was bruised and swollen. A black eye, a split lip, and fresh cuts along his cheek. He stumbled slightly and avoided looking anywhere near my direction. After that night, Derek was different. The reckless confidence was gone. One afternoon, he muttered as he passed me on the street, "This isn't over." But he never came back. My father, too, kept his distance, his usual angry calls stopped coming. Maybe they both knew something had changed inside me, that I was no longer the scared girl they could control. For the first time in my life, I felt powerful. Not because I struck back with fists or weapons, I never did. My power was in making them feel helpless and small, like I had felt for so long. I made them face their own fear. I still keep my sketchbooks, but now they're different. They hold more than just drawings and scattered thoughts, they're filled with notes, plans, and reminders of my strength. Each page marks a step I've taken away from fear and toward control. Sometimes I flip through them in the quiet of my apartment, tracing the lines I once made when I was scared, then seeing how those lines turned into something harder, sharper. I am not weak. I am not the scared little girl they tried to bury. I am someone who survived. If they ever come for me again, if Derek or my father think they can break me, I know exactly what to do. I won't run, and I won't hide. I will watch, wait, and strike. I've learned how to turn invisibility into power, silence into a weapon, and fear into fuel. They think they controlled me for years, but the truth is, I was always planning. Waiting for the moment when I could take back what was mine. Now that moment is here. And if they step back into my life, I will destroy everything they built on my pain. I am Emily. I am not their victim. I am their reckoning. Another story for you. My name is Emily. For as long as I can remember, my home was a battlefield, not a refuge. People say family is supposed to protect you, but mine only broke me down. My father's voice wasn't a comfort. It was cold, sharp, filled with anger that spilled over like poison. "You're useless, Emily," he said one night when I forgot to bring him his drink. "You'll never be anything." My mother was quiet, her eyes always looking away, pretending not to see the fights, the bruises. She never stopped it. Never tried to help. And then there was my brother, Derek, older, stronger, crueler. He wasn't just my brother. He was my tormentor, my jailer, the one who made every day a nightmare. When he pushed me down the stairs once, laughing as I cried, my father only said, "Good. Learn to take a hit." I learned early that hiding was my only defense. I would curl up in the shadows of our house, hoping no one would find me. But Derek always did. "Thought you could hide from me?" he'd say, grabbing my arm and dragging me back into the chaos. The pain wasn't just physical, it was every word, every look, every moment I was told I was nothing. By 16, I began writing in a small notebook I kept hidden under my mattress. I filled its pages with sketches and angry words, my only escape from the endless violence. When I turned 18, I ran. I didn't pack much. I left the house one night after Derek smashed my phone in a fit of rage. I didn't look back. I found a tiny apartment on the edge of town. The walls were thin, the floor creaked, and the neighbors weren't friendly. But it was mine. I worked 2 jobs, a waitress by day, a janitor by night, scraping together every penny to keep the lights on and food on the table. But they didn't let me go. Derek showed up one night, slamming his fist on my door. "You think you can run from me?" he shouted. I locked the door and stayed silent. My father called, demanding I come help fix things around the house, but I told him, no. His voice dropped low and cold. "You'll regret this, Emily." I was tired of being scared. I was tired of running. So I started watching. I learned Derek was sinking fast, debts, bad people, dangerous deals. I watched my father's nights wasted on alcohol, his anger growing smaller and more desperate. One night, I slipped into my father's garage and took the money Derek had hidden, enough to ruin him, but not enough to notice right away. I spread rumors carefully, watching the panic grow in Derek's eyes when he realized he was being hunted by those he owed. The night Derek came to my door, rain soaking him through, fists pounding like thunder, I stood silent behind the locked door. "You're the one who did this," he screamed. "I'll find you." But I was already gone. I wasn't the scared girl anymore. I was the storm. After that stormy night, I didn't sleep. I sat by the window, watching the rain drip down the glass, feeling the cold seep into my bones but also the fire growing inside me. Derek's threats echoed in my head, but something had shifted. I wasn't shrinking anymore. The next morning, I started digging deeper into Derek's life. I watched him from a distance as he met with the same men I had suspected: rough, sharp-eyed, dangerous. I took notes in my notebook, every detail recorded: names, places, times. I found out Derek owed a lot more than I thought. One night, I followed him to a rundown bar where he handed over cash to a burly man with a scar running down his cheek. "You're late," the man growled. Derek's face paled, his usual bravado gone. That was my chance. I started feeding small pieces of information to Derek's creditors, anonymous tips about where he hid his stash, who he was skimming from, lies disguised as truth. Paranoia took over him like a disease. Meanwhile, I kept building my own strength. I took self-defense classes, learned to lock doors better, installed cameras. Every day I felt less like a victim and more like a hunter. One evening, my father called again. "You think you're better than us now?" His voice was bitter, but weak. "You'll break like the rest." I looked at the phone in my hand and smiled quietly. "No," I said. "I'm already stronger." Weeks passed, and the tension in Derek's life exploded. He was jumpy, paranoid, snapping at friends and enemies alike. One night, I heard shouting outside my window, a fight between Derek and the scarred man from the bar. Glass shattered. Derek screamed for help, but no one came. The next day, Derek showed up at my door with a black eye and a twisted lip. "This isn't over," he spat, but his voice cracked. I didn't answer. I didn't need to. I was already moving on. Months later, my father called for the last time. His voice was tired, almost broken. "You ruined us." I sat back and breathed deeply. "No," I said softly. "You ruined yourself." Now, when I look at my sketchbooks, they don't just remind me of pain. They remind me of survival, power, and the life I fought to claim. I am Emily. I am not broken. I am free. Another story for you. My name is Emily. I thought love was supposed to feel safe, but with Jake, safety was an illusion. At first, he was everything I wanted: charming, attentive, the kind of person who made you believe in forever. But it didn't take long before the cracks started to show. The first time he snapped, I was confused. A sharp word, a cold glance when I asked where he'd been. I told myself it was stress, that I was imagining things, but the tension only grew. The controlling messages, the silent treatments, the jealousy that twisted every conversation. Then came the night that changed everything. We'd argued about something small, maybe I was late meeting him, and suddenly his hand was on my arm, hard, and his voice low and threatening. "You belong to me," he said, and the fear settled deep inside me like a stone. I stayed with him, trapped by hope and guilt and fear. But every day, the weight pressed harder. When I finally found the strength to leave, it felt like pulling my soul from quicksand. He didn't let go. Jake showed up at my job, calling me names, trying to scare me back. He sent messages at all hours, threatening to ruin my reputation, telling lies to my friends. I could feel the walls closing in again. I knew I couldn't run. I had to fight. I started watching him. Quietly. From a distance. I learned his patterns, where he went, who he met, who believed his lies. He was reckless, and that was my advantage. I collected proof, screenshots of cruel texts, recordings of angry phone calls, photos of him with other women while telling me he was faithful. One night, I followed him to a dive bar where he met with people I knew were dangerous. I stayed in the shadows, recording every word. "She's just a nuisance," he bragged, "but no one's gonna believe her." Not yet. I smiled to myself. Soon, everyone would. I sent the recordings to his friends, to the people who thought they knew him. I leaked his lies and his secrets, the way he cheated, the way he manipulated. Slowly, they started turning away. Jake's world was cracking. He called me, angry and desperate, but I didn't answer. He showed up at my apartment, pounding on the door, screaming that I was ruining him. I locked the door, unshaken. This time, I held the power. Then came the night I slipped into his apartment while he was out. I left a folder on his desk, everything I had collected, laid bare. No threats, no screaming. Just the truth. The truth he thought he could bury forever. The next day, chaos. His friends confronted him. His boss called him in. His lies collapsed, and so did his control. I watched from a distance, heart pounding. This was the moment I reclaimed my life. It wasn't easy. The scars don't vanish overnight. But I'm free now, stronger than I ever thought I could be. I'm Emily. And this is my story of survival, strength, and revenge. The days after I left the folder were some of the hardest. Every notification on my phone made my heart leap. Was it him? Was he coming for me? But I stayed calm on the outside, even when inside I was trembling. I had to be stronger than my fear. Jake's calls turned from angry to pleading, then threatening again. One night, I found a message that made my blood run cold. You think you won? I'm coming for you. I knew I couldn't hide forever, but I was ready. This time, I wasn't just surviving, I was fighting back. I started carrying pepper spray, changed my routes, told close friends where I was at all times. But I also planned. I watched his social media, the places he went, who he met. I noticed he was careless when he drank, quick to boast about his control over me and others. That arrogance was my weapon. Then came the confrontation. It was late, and I was walking home from work. I saw him waiting near the corner, his eyes dark, face set with anger. My breath caught, but I didn't run. I stepped closer, voice steady. What do you want, Jake? He sneered, you think you broke me? You ruined everything. His fists clenched. You belong to me, Emily. You always will. No, I said, locking eyes with him. You belong to your own lies now. I pulled out my phone and pressed record. Everyone's seen what you really are. He lunged at me, but I was ready. I sidestepped, sprayed the pepper spray into his face, and ran. His screams chased me down the street, but I didn't stop.